In medieval England, if you were accused of a crime, they'd make you grab a red-hot iron bar and walk 3 steps. Your burned hand would then be bandaged, and if it healed cleanly after 3 days, congratulations, God thought you were innocent. If it festered, well, hope you enjoyed having hands, because you were about to lose one. Alright, before the story, if you're here regularly, subscribe helps me out. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and the time. Yesterday, someone from Portugal said they listen while cooking dinner, and someone from Chicago was using it for a morning commute. Wild. We're heading to medieval England in a minute. First though, get comfortable. Seriously, take a second. Adjust whatever needs adjusting. You're not going to want to move once we start. The first thing that hits you is the smell. Not just one smell, but a symphony of them. Sharp wood smoke, sour, unwashed bodies, the musty reek of damp straw, and the unmistakable punch of animal dung. Your eyes crack open to dim grey light filtering through a single small window, just a hole in the wall, really, covered with a scrap of stretched bladder skin instead of glass. You're not alone. The soft breathing and occasional grunt tells you that even before your eyes adjust enough to make out the shapes, your family, all of them, are packed around you on the packed earth floor. And not just your family. In the corner, something large shifts and snorts. The pig. Of course the pig is inside. It's winter and you need the body heat. The cold hits next, wrapping around your face like a wet cloth. Your breath forms little clouds that hang in the air before dissolving. The single ember in the central hearth has nearly died, and someone needs to bring it back to life before everyone freezes to death. That someone, naturally, is you. Wake up, a voice croaks nearby. Your mother. She doesn't need to say more. In the 13th century English winter, you're always one careless morning away from disaster. A dead fire means no warmth, no cooking, and potentially no survival. You force yourself upright, your back complaining after a night on the straw-stuffed sack you call a mattress. Something tickles across your arm. Just a flea, one of your many roommates. You've stopped noticing them most of the time, the same way you've stopped noticing the constant itch of your rough wool clothing, which you've been wearing day and night since October. Or fire's nearly out, you mutter, though no one needs the update. You stumble to the hearth, nearly tripping over your little brother, who's curled up closest to where the warmth used to be. Carefully, you pick up the small iron pot that contains last night's ember, protected all night to preserve this most precious resource. Starting a fire from scratch isn't impossible, but it's time-consuming and difficult. Time and energy you can't spare when the day's work is already looming. You feed the ember bits of dried moss and the smallest splinters of wood, gently blowing life back into the orange glow. The process is almost meditative, a ritual your hands know by heart, even as your mind slowly climbs out of sleep. When a small flame finally catches, something in your chest loosens. One more day where your family won't freeze to death, at least not from lack of trying. The smoke rises toward the hole in the thatched roof designed to let it escape. Most of it does. Some doesn't, filling the single room with a grey haze that makes your eyes water. But the smoke is also a blessing. It helps keep the insects at bay, and even preserves the thatch itself, coating everything in a protective layer of soot. Get the water, your mother says, already kneading yesterday's dough that was left to rise overnight. The precious grain was ground at the Lord's mill. For a fee, of course, always a fee. You grab the wooden bucket and steel yourself for the cold as you push open the door, its leather hinges creaking in protest. The blast of winter air feels like a slap, but you're moving now, heading toward the village well. Outside, the sky is just beginning to lighten, a murky pre-dawn grey. Yours isn't the only column of smoke rising into the winter air. The entire village is waking up, 23 households of serfs, all bound to the same patch of land, all owing service to the same lord, whose manor house sits on the small hill overlooking your lives. The mud of the village path has frozen overnight, making footing treacherous. One bad fall and you could break something. A broken leg or arm in winter is a death sentence when you need to work every day just to survive. No work means no food. No food means death. It's that simple. Morning, grunts old Edwin as you pass. He's already butchering a scrawny chicken, his gnarled hands working with practiced efficiency despite the cold. Blood stains the snow around his wooden block, shockingly red against the white. Life is blood and dirt out here, no use pretending otherwise. Hard freeze last night, he adds unnecessarily. Morning, you reply. Any news from the travellers? Edwin's son is married to a girl from the next village over, making his house a rare connection to the outside world. News travels slowly in medieval England, carried by peddlers, pilgrims, and the occasional royal messenger. Heard the sheriff caught them poachers from Blackwood, Edwin says, his knife never stopping its work. They're to face the ordeal tomorrow. You suppress a shudder. Everyone knows what that means. The church might have officially banned trial by ordeal back in 1215, but in remote villages like yours, the old ways die hard. Those men will either plunge their arms into boiling water or carry burning iron. Their flesh will sizzle and their screams will echo, all to determine if God thinks them innocent or guilty. Poor bastards, you mutter. Poaching the king's deer is a serious crime, but a hungry family is a powerful motivator. You reach the well where a small crowd has already gathered. Nearly froze solid, says Anne, the tanner's wife. William had to break the ice with an axe. The village well is the centre of gossip and social life even in winter. As you wait your turn, you listen to the flow of information. Who's sick? Who's fighting? Who's been caught doing what they shouldn't? In a village of less than 100 souls, privacy is an unknown concept. When your turn comes, you lower the bucket. The rope burns your cold hands. Another small pain in a life full of them. The water, when you pull it up, has slivers of ice floating on top. Walking back is harder with the heavy bucket. The water sloshes, occasionally spilling over to freeze almost instantly on your chapped hands. By the time you make it back to your hut, your fingers are numb claws. Inside, the fire has grown, and the one-room dwelling feels almost warm by comparison. Your father is up now, fixing the loose binding on his scythe. He nods at the water, but says nothing. Words are often scarce in the morning. There's too much to do. Your mother takes some of the water for the morning pottage, a thick porridge of oats and dried peas. It's what you eat most days, sometimes with a bit of salted pork if you're lucky. Today looks like it will be just pottage, plain, filling, and keeping starvation at arm's length for one more day. While it cooks, you help your younger sister milk the family's most prized possession, an elderly goat that somehow produces enough milk to supplement your diet. The goat is tethered in the corner opposite the pig, equally unhappy about the living arrangements, but too valuable to house outside where wolves or thieves might get it. She's giving less, your sister whispers, her small hands working the teats with practiced efficiency. Do you think she's sick? You examine the goat's eyes, looking for signs of illness. A sick goat could mean disaster. No, just old and cold, you reply, hoping you're right. We'll give her extra hay today. The hay itself is a precious resource, carefully stored in the small lean-to attached to your hut. Every blade represents hours of summer labour with the scythe, the drying, the storing. Nothing is wasted when winter starvation is always just one bad decision away. By now, the hut has filled with the smell of cooking pottage. Your stomach growls loudly enough for your mother to hear, earning you a sympathetic glance. The hunger is always worst in the morning before the first meal takes the edge off. Go check the snares before we eat, your father says, finally breaking his silence. Might be lucky. It's not a suggestion. You grab your cloak, little more than a rough rectangle of homespun wool with a hole for your head, and head back into the cold. The family has 4 snares set in the woodland edge, a small concession from the Lord who otherwise forbids hunting in his forests. Snares can catch rabbits, squirrels, or if you're especially fortunate, a pheasant. Meat is rare in winter, and even a squirrel would make the day's pottage significantly more nourishing. The walk to the snares takes you past the village church, a stone structure that puts all the wooden and wattle and daub homes to shame. Even at this early hour, the priest is outside, his breath clouding as he speaks with the village reeve, the man responsible for ensuring everyone completes their required labour for the Lord. 2 days of labour owed before the month's end, the reeve is saying. The Lord wants the new storage pit dug before spring. You keep your head down as you pass. Extra labour service means less time to tend your family's strips of land, which means less food come harvest time. It's a delicate balance, always teetering on the edge of not enough. The woodland is silent under its coating of frost, your footsteps crunching loudly with each step. You check the first 3 snares, empty. Your heart sinks a little lower with each one. At the 4th, you stop short, a small burst of elation rising in your chest. A rabbit, its white winter coat, stained red where the snare caught it, hangs limply from the twisted cord. "Thank you," you whisper, though you're not sure if you're thanking God, the rabbit, or just blind luck. You quickly reset the snare and tuck the rabbit into your cloak. Its body is still slightly warm. The village is fully awake when you return, smoke rising from every dwelling. Children are carrying water, women are grinding grain in hand querns for the daily bread that will go into the communal oven later, and men are gathering tools for the day's labour. Medieval life waits for no one. The moment dawn breaks, work begins. Inside your hut, the rabbit is received with muted celebration. No one speaks their relief out loud. That would be tempting fate, but your mother's hands move quickly as she skins and guts the animal, setting aside the valuable fur and adding chunks of meat to the pottage. "Hide the bones when you're done," your father reminds everyone unnecessarily. Waste is both a sin and a luxury you cannot afford. The bones will become broth, the fur will be cured and sewn into something useful, the sinew will strengthen thread. An entire economy of scarcity dictates that nothing goes unused. The family gathers around the cooking pot. Father, mother, you, your younger sister, your 2 small brothers, and the ancient grandmother who rarely speaks but whose gnarled hands never stop working, even now spinning wool into thread as she waits for food. The eldest brother is missing, sent to be a labourer at the monastery 2 villages over. You haven't seen him since harvest time. Your mother ladles the steaming pottage into wooden bowls, 1 for each person. The portions are small, but the rabbit makes the thin porridge rich with fat and protein. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, letting the warmth spread through your body. For this brief moment, the constant worry about food subsides. John Cooper's boy is feverish, your mother says between careful bites. The red spots came yesterday. A heavy silence falls. Everyone knows what that means. The spotted fever takes children quickly, spreading from house to house like an evil spirit. Your father makes the sign of the cross, and your mother touches the small pouch of protective herbs hanging around her neck. "Keep away from their house," she tells the younger children. It's the only medicine they know. Distance from the sick. That and prayers. When the meal is finished, your father stands, his frame filling the small space. Despite the constant labour and occasional hunger, he's a strong man. He has to be to survive. To the fields, he says. We need to check the drainage ditches after the snow. You nod, already dreading the cold, wet work ahead. The strips of land allocated to your family lie scattered among the great open fields surrounding the village. In this season, they look barren and lifeless, but beneath the frozen soil, the winter wheat sleeps, your family's hope for the coming year. Before leaving, you help bank the fire carefully, preserving the embers for the evening's return. Your mother will keep it fed throughout the day as she works on indoor tasks with your sister and grandmother. Mind the north field ditch, she tells your father. Flooded bad last thaw. He nods, and you follow him out into the full light of morning. The sun has finally broken through, painting the frost-covered village in blinding white brilliance. For a moment, it's beautiful enough to make you forget the cold, the hunger, the constant work. Then a blast of wind cuts through your inadequate clothing and reality returns. Other men and older boys are heading to the fields too, carrying spades and picks for clearing the drainage ditches that keep the precious fields from turning into useless swamps come spring. You pass the village smithy, already hot with his morning fire, the rhythmic ping of his hammer marking time like a heartbeat. Think it'll snow again? You ask your father as you walk. Small talk is rare, practical communication being the norm, but the beauty of the morning has loosened something in you. He glances at the sky, reading the clouds with the expertise of a man whose life depends on weather. Yes, he says simply. Tonight. Heavy. You digest this information with a frown. Heavy snow means the drainage work is even more important. It also means tomorrow will be harder in every way. As you reach the edge of the village, the manor house comes fully into view atop its small hill. Stone-built and 2 stories tall, it represents a level of comfort and security so far beyond your experience it might as well be a castle in a storyteller's tale. Smoke rises from multiple chimneys, real chimneys, not just holes in the roof. The Lord's family will be eating meat today, and tomorrow, and the day after. They'll be warm, their work will be optional. Your father sees you looking. Eyes down, son, he warns quietly. Envy's a sin, and it doesn't warm your belly neither. You nod and turn away from the manor, facing the open fields that demand your labour. The sun climbs higher as you walk, but brings little warmth with it. The medieval winter has settled in for a long stay, and you'll face each day of it the same way. One task at a time, one meal at a time, one breath at a time. Survival isn't something you think about as a concept. It's just what you do. Every decision, from banking the fire to setting snares to fixing drainage ditches, is part of the endless work of staying alive in a world where nature and society seem equally determined to make that difficult. As you reach the first drainage ditch and plunge your spade into the half-frozen mud, you don't complain. The work is hard, but it's necessary, and necessity is the master you serve most faithfully, even more than the lord on the hill, or the king in his distant castle, or the god in his even more distant heaven. Your back already aching, you glance at the position of the sun. The day has barely begun. Hours of labour stretch ahead before you can return to the small comfort of your smoky hut. But that's life in medieval England, a constant negotiation with hunger, cold and exhaustion. You dig deeper into the frozen earth, your breath clouding in the winter air. The drainage ditch is half frozen, half mud, the worst possible combination. Your wooden spade, a treasured tool handed down from your grandfather, chips away at the ice while your feet slowly sink into the muck beneath. Your father works 10 paces ahead, his rhythm never faltering despite the cold that makes your fingers feel like useless sausages attached to your hands. Deeper there, he calls without looking back. Water'll pool if you don't clear it proper. You grunt in acknowledgement, too cold for words. The wind cuts across the open field like a knife, finding every gap in your clothing. No matter how many layers of wool and linen you wrap yourself in, the medieval winter always finds a way in. Hey, you there. The voice makes you flinch. It belongs to Walter, the manor's reeve, the man who ensures the Lord's work gets done by people like you. Selected from among the villagers but loyal to the Lord, the reeve walks a difficult line. Today he looks annoyed. You're needed at the new storage pit, he says, pointing toward the far field where a group of men are already digging. Lord's orders, 4 men from each family. Your father straightens, wincing as his back protests. We're clearing drainage, he says, gesturing to the ditch. Spring floods will ruin the seed if... Lord's orders, Walter repeats, cutting him off. Storage pit first, your strips second. Send the boy. And just like that your day changes. No arguments, no negotiations. You are a serf, bound to this land and to the Lord who controls it. Your labour isn't your own. Go on, your father says quietly. He'll now have to finish the drainage work alone, work meant for 2 or 3 men. You follow Walter across the frost-hardened field, joining a sombre line of other men and boys being gathered from their own necessary tasks. No one speaks much as you walk. Complaining is pointless and potentially dangerous if it reaches the wrong ears. The new storage pit is an ambitious project, a massive hole being dug into the earth where the Lord can store grain away from rats, weather, and hungry peasants. The existing pit has served for decades, but the Lord wants more capacity, which means you'll be breaking your back digging frozen soil instead of protecting your family's food supply. The group of workers at the pit has swelled to nearly 30 men by the time you arrive. You recognise faces from your village and the next one over. Thomas with his missing front teeth, young Henry who got married last spring, old Edwin's middle son whose name you always forget. 3 more spans deeper, 2 wider, instructs the Lord's steward, a thin man who's never lifted a farming tool in his life but knows exactly how much work a peasant should accomplish in a day. The Lord inspects at midday. You're handed a pick, heavier than your spade, and awkward in your cold hands. The pit is already impressive, a gaping wound in the earth nearly 6 feet deep at the centre. You find a spot along the edge and begin the mind-numbing work of breaking the frozen ground. The repetitive swing of the pick becomes almost meditative after a while. Lift, swing, crack. Lift, swing, crack. Your mind wanders, even as your body works. You think about the rabbit from this morning, how the meat enriched the pottage. You think about the spotted fever in the Cooper household, and silently pray it won't spread. You think about the storage pit you're digging and how little of the grain it will hold will ever pass your lips. Heard about the trial tomorrow? Thomas asks during a brief pause to catch your breath. He's working beside you, his pick rising and falling in the same rhythm as yours. The poachers? You reply, remembering Edwin's news. Thomas nods, leaning closer. My cousin's married to the miller's daughter. She says they caught 3 men from Blackwood with 2 of the king's deer, but one of them is the blacksmith's nephew, so they're giving him the ordeal instead of hanging him outright. Which ordeal, you ask, though you're not sure you want to know. Hot iron, Thomas says, with grim fascination. 3 steps with it burning in their palms. The priest'll bless it first, make sure God's judgment is true. You've never seen an ordeal by hot iron, though you've heard the screams once when you were younger. The memory makes your stomach clench. They deserve it, says another man working nearby. Robert, a fervent churchgoer known for his rigid views. King's deer are king's deer. God's law and king's law both say stealing's a sin. Easy to say when your belly's full, mutters Thomas, too quietly for Robert to hear. You stay silent. Opinions on justice are dangerous things to share openly. The conversation shifts to safer topics. The weather, predictions for spring planting, whose daughter might marry whose son when summer comes. The work continues as the sun climbs higher, offering little warmth but marking the passage of time. Your arms burn with fatigue, your back screams with every swing of the pick, but you don't stop. No one stops until the steward calls for a brief rest at mid-morning. The break lasts only long enough to drink some water and chew a crust of bread that you've brought wrapped in a scrap of cloth. Some men have nothing and simply sit, conserving energy. You share your small crust with Thomas, who nods gratefully. "Lord's coming," someone hisses, and everyone scrambles to their feet. The lord of the manor approaches on horseback, the massive beast steaming in the cold air. Unlike you in your rough wool and patched linen, the lord wears furs and fine woolen cloth dyed a deep blue, a colour so expensive that your entire family couldn't afford a scrap of it the size of your palm. He surveys the pit with a critical eye, saying nothing as the steward points out the progress. To him, you are all interchangeable parts of his estate, no more worthy of individual recognition than the trees in his forest or the stones in his manor walls. "Deeper," is all he says, before turning his horse and riding back toward the warmth of his hall. The steward's face hardens. "You heard him," he barks. "Back to work. No more breaks until midday." And so you dig. The sun continues its arc and the pit grows deeper, wider, your muscles burning beyond pain into a dull, constant throb. This is the reality of medieval labour, backbreaking, endless and utterly necessary for the survival of everyone, from the lowest serf to the lord himself. Without these storage pits, without the fields you farm and the drainage ditches you dig, everyone would starve. "My father told me," Thomas says, during a brief pause to remove a large stone, that his grandfather remembered the Great Famine, 3 years of rain, crops rotted in the fields, said people ate bark off trees and boiled leather to make soup. You've heard the stories too, passed down as warnings. The famine of 1315, 1317 killed thousands. Whole villages disappeared. The old folks say the dead were buried in mass graves because no one had the strength to dig individual ones. Such catastrophes remain a constant fear, lurking just one bad harvest away. My grandmother said they ate cats, adds Henry with macabre fascination, even rats when it got bad enough. "That's nothing," says an older man named Will, pausing in his digging. "My uncle was in London during the bad years, said he saw a woman tried for stealing a baby to eat it." A heavy silence falls over your section of the pit. Such tales would be dismissed as dark fantasy in better times, but everyone knows hunger drives people to unimaginable acts. You've never been that hungry, not quite, but you've seen hunger's shadow during late winter, when the stores run low. You've felt its claws in your belly during the hungry gap of early spring when winter stores are depleted and new crops aren't ready. "They executed her?" someone finally asks. Will nods grimly. "Burned her. Said eating Christian flesh made her a witch." No one comments further. The conversation has ventured into the territory of nightmares. The picks and spades resume their rhythm, punctuating the heavy silence. Midday finally arrives, announced by the distant church bell. The steward reluctantly calls a halt, allowing you to rest and eat whatever meagre lunch you've brought. For you, it's a small bundle containing a hard crust of bread and an onion, luxury compared to some years. You find a relatively dry spot at the edge of the pit and sit with Thomas and a few others from your village. The food disappears quickly, barely taking the edge off your hunger. No one speaks much as they eat. Conservation of energy is instinctive when you live close to the edge of survival. As you finish your last bite, a commotion from the direction of the village catches your attention. A group of men are marching down the road, surrounding three figures with their hands bound. "The poachers," Thomas whispers, excitement and dread mixing in his voice. "They're taking them to the church to hold them for tomorrow's ordeal." Everyone stands to watch the grim procession. Even from a distance you can see the fear on the captives' faces. Three ordinary men who made the desperate choice to hunt the king's deer and now must face the judgment of both man and God. The manor's bailiff leads the group, his position of authority clear from his better clothing and the swagger in his walk. Behind him, 4 men-at-arms, rare in your small corner of England, surround the prisoners. Such a show of force for 3 hungry poachers seems excessive, until you remember that poaching isn't just theft. It's a challenge to the very order of society. If men can take the king's deer without consequence, what else might they take? "Know any of them?" you ask Thomas, whose connections through his cousin sometimes give him better information. He squints at the distant figures. The tall one's Will Fletcher from Blackwood, makes arrows, has 5 children. Other 2 I don't recognise. The procession disappears behind the church, and gradually the workers turn back to their task. The break is over, though no one has officially called for work to resume. In the medieval world, time is measured by the sun and the church bells, but labour is measured by what needs doing, not by hours. You climb back into the pit, your muscles protesting after the brief rest. The afternoon stretch is always the hardest. Fatigue building on fatigue, cold seeping deeper into your bones. But you keep working. Everyone does. The choice is as simple as it is brutal. Work or starve. "My father was called as a witness once," says Henry, as the digging resumes. "For a trial by combat. Said it was the most terrible thing he ever saw." Trial by combat. Another form of ordeal where opponents fight to the death or surrender, the victor presumed to have God's favour. Like trial by fire or water, it places judgment in divine hands. Unlike those trials, it makes a spectacle of violence that can last hours. "Who fought?" someone asks. "A knight accused of stealing another knight's wife," Henry says. "The husband challenged him. They fought with swords for nearly 2 hours before the challenger lost his footing and got a blade through his throat." "And the wife?" asks Thomas. Henry shrugs. "Given to the victor, I suppose. That's how it works for nobles." The conversation shifts to other tales of justice. Some witnessed, others merely heard. A woman ducked in the pond for scolds. A man forced to walk barefoot through the village carrying the sheep he stole. A child beaten publicly for stealing apples from the priest's tree. Justice in medieval England is rarely private and never gentle. It serves as both punishment and warning, a public spectacle designed to reinforce the consequences of stepping outside the rigid social and legal boundaries. By mid-afternoon, the storage pit has grown impressively. The steward paces the edge, occasionally barking orders, but mostly watching with cold calculation, estimating how much more can be extracted from your labour before darkness forces an end to the work. Your world has narrowed to the next swing of the pick, the next scoop of earth. Your body moves mechanically, conserving energy through efficient movement learned through years of similar labour. This is the physical reality of medieval survival. Bodies pushed to their limits day after day, year after year, until they finally break. "Someone's coming," calls a voice from the edge of the pit. All eyes turn to see a solitary figure hurrying across the field from the village. It's a boy, young Wat Cooper, whose family was stricken with the spotted fever. His presence sends a ripple of fear through the workers. No one wants him near, carrying contagion from his sick household. "Stay back!" shouts the steward as Wat approaches. "What business have you here?" Watt stops at a safe distance, his thin face pinched with cold and worry. "Message for Thomas Baker," he calls. His wife says come quick. Their boy's taken ill with the spots. Thomas drops his pick as though it's suddenly burning hot. His face drains of colour. "My William?" he asks, his voice cracking. "How bad?" Watt shifts uncomfortably. "Bad enough they sent me running." Without waiting for permission, Thomas scrambles out of the pit. The steward starts to object, then thinks better of it. Even he understands some emergencies outweigh the Lord's work. "Go," he says with grudging permission. "The rest of you, back to digging." Thomas runs toward the village without a backward glance, fear giving his tired legs new energy. You watch him go with a heavy heart. The spotted fever takes many children, especially in winter when bodies are already weakened by cold and limited food. Your own family has lost two. A brother and sister who now lie in the churchyard under small wooden crosses. "Poor bastard," mutters the man working beside you. "That's his only son." Work resumes with a sombre mood hanging over the pit. Illness is a constant companion in medieval life, striking without warning and often without mercy. You say a silent prayer for Thomas's boy, adding another to keep the fever from your own home. As the afternoon wears on, the sky begins to darken, with heavy clouds rolling in from the north. Your father's weather prediction is proving accurate. Snow is coming, and from the look of the clouds, plenty of it. "Finish up," the steward finally calls as the light begins to fade. "We'll continue tomorrow if weather permits." The relief is palpable as tools are collected and counted. The Lord's tools are too valuable to lose track of. Your shoulders and back scream with pain as you climb out of the pit, your legs wobbly from exhaustion. The day's labour has left you drained, but it isn't over yet. There are still home tasks waiting, animals to feed, firewood to gather, water to carry. You join the tired procession of men heading back to the village. Everyone walks with the same shuffling gait, bodies pushed beyond reasonable limits, but still moving forward because they must. This is survival in its most basic form, one step after another, one day after another. The village comes into view, smoke rising from multiple chimneys into the darkening sky. Despite its poverty and hardship, the sight stirs something warm in your chest, home such as it is. As you near the church, you notice a small crowd gathered outside. The three poachers are being led inside, their faces grim with the knowledge of what tomorrow will bring. The priest stands at the door, his expression unreadable as he prepares to lock them in for the night. You pause to watch, catching the eye of one prisoner, the tall one Thomas identified as Will Fletcher. There's no anger in his gaze, just a dull resignation that you recognise all too well. It's the look of a man who gambled for his family's survival and lost. Tomorrow he'll grasp red-hot iron and walk 3 steps while his flesh sizzles and smokes. If the wounds heal cleanly, a rare occurrence given the lack of proper medical care, he'll be deemed innocent by God and set free. If infection sets in, which is far more likely he'll lose a hand, or worse, all for trying to feed 5 hungry children. Justice is seldom fair in medieval England, but it's what you have. The alternative is no justice at all, a world where the strong simply take what they want without consequence. At least the ordeal gives him a chance, however small. You continue toward home, your thoughts troubled by the scene. The smell of wood smoke grows stronger, mixing with the earthy odours of animals and human habitation. Despite the coming snow and the exhaustion weighing down your limbs, you detour slightly to check the snares before darkness makes it impossible. The first 3 are empty, but the 4th holds another stroke of luck. A fat wood pigeon caught by its leg. Your spirits lift immediately. 2 meals with meat in one day is rare good fortune in winter. With the bird tucked inside your cloak, you hurry the rest of the way home. The snow begins just as you reach your door. Fat, lazy flakes that promise significant accumulation by morning. Inside, the hut is blessedly warm compared to the open fields. The fire burns steadily in the central hearth, and the smell of cooking fills the small space. Your mother and sister look up as you enter, relief crossing their faces. Thomas Baker's boy has the fever, your mother says before you can speak. It's not a question. News travels quickly in small communities. You nod, removing your cloak and revealing the pigeon. Caught in the snare, you say, handing it to your sister, who immediately begins the process of plucking it. Your father, your mother asks, returning to her spinning. Still working the drainage, you reply, settling near the fire to thaw your frozen fingers. Lord called me to dig the new storage pit. She makes a small noise of acknowledgement but offers no commentary. What would be the point? The work is what it is, unavoidable and necessary. Your youngest brother crawls into your lap seeking warmth and company. Despite your exhaustion, you welcome his small weight. His presence a reminder of why you endure each day's labour. For him, for all of them, for survival. They brought in the poachers today, you tell your mother as your sister efficiently prepares the pigeon. Ordeals tomorrow after morning mass. God have mercy on them, she replies quietly, making the sign of the cross. Outside, the snow falls heavier, blanketing the village in white silence. Tomorrow will bring fresh challenges, paths to clear, animals to tend, the storage pit to continue digging if the weather allows. It will also bring the ordeal, a grim reminder of justice in this harsh world. But for now, there is warmth, family, and the prospect of pigeon meat in the evening pottage. In medieval England, where survival balances on a knife's edge, these small comforts are everything. Your father returns as darkness falls completely, his face lined with exhaustion but the drainage work completed. He nods approvingly at the pigeon being added to the pot. Snow's getting heavy, he says, warming his hands by the fire. No field work tomorrow, I'd wager. The ordeal's tomorrow, your sister reminds him. Like many in the village, she finds the brutal spectacle fascinating despite its horror. Better than hanging, your father says pragmatically. At least they have a chance. A small chance, you think, but don't say. In your 15 years, you've never heard of anyone walking away unscathed from an ordeal by hot iron. The family gathers for the evening meal, a ritual repeated in every hut across the village. The pigeon has enriched the pottage considerably, adding flavour and precious fat to the simple porridge. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, the day's labour having earned this sustenance in the most direct way possible. Outside, the snow continues to fall, insulating the hut and muffling the sounds of the village. Tomorrow's challenges will come soon enough. For now, there is this moment of relative peace, this small victory against the constant struggle of medieval life. Your eyelids grow heavy as the warmth and food work their magic on your exhausted body. Another day survived, another night of rest before the cycle begins again. Morning arrives with a world transformed. Snow blankets everything in pristine white, softening the hard edges of medieval life under a deceptively gentle cover. The temperature has dropped further overnight, and your breath hangs in the air like little ghosts that dissolve almost as soon as they appear. Your father was right. There will be no field work today. Even the Lord's steward wouldn't expect men to dig through snow-covered frozen ground. But this doesn't mean a day of rest. In medieval England, there is always work, especially in winter when survival requires constant attention. Market day, your mother reminds everyone, as the family huddles around the morning fire, blowing on fingers and toes to restore feeling. Market happens every Tuesday, regardless of weather, in the village green near the church. Today, with snow nearly knee-deep in places, attendance will be smaller than usual, but some will brave the cold to trade what little they have. "We need salt," your father says, the words hanging heavy with implication. Salt is expensive, preciously so, but vital for preserving meat and fish. Without it, your family couldn't store food for lean times. "And thread," your mother adds, holding up the nearly empty spool. You're given a small pouch containing the family's trading goods, 2 carefully preserved rabbit furs from last week's catch, a small jar of precious honey from the single hive your family maintains, and 3 intricately carved wooden spoons your father made during the long winter evenings. "Trade fair," your mother warns as she hands you the pouch. "No less than 2 silver pennies for the honey." Money is rare in your household. Most trading happens through barter, goods for goods, but some items, like salt, can only be purchased with coin. The silver penny your family has saved since harvest time is tucked into a secret pocket sewn into your father's tunic. The village church bell rings the hour as you and your father step out into the snow. The cold immediately bites at your face, the only exposed part of your body. Everyone else in the family will stay home, conserving heat and energy. The fewer bodies moving through the snow, the better. Other villagers are emerging from their homes as well, trudging through the fresh snow toward the village centre. Despite the harsh conditions, there's an air of subdued excitement. Market day brings news, gossip, and the possibility of small luxuries. A taste of honey, a bit of colourful thread, perhaps even a sip of ale from the Brewster's stand. As you near the village centre, you see the market taking shape. It's a small affair by any standard, nothing like the great markets in towns and cities, but it's the heart of local commerce. A dozen or so vendors have set up makeshift stalls, mostly just tables covered with whatever goods they have to offer. Goodwife Sarah has her usual array of rough-spun thread and yarn. What the miller has small sacks of flour from the Lord's mill where he works. Edwin the tanner displays a few simple leather goods, belts, pouches, and a single pair of shoes that would cost more than your family earns in a month. The travelling peddler who visits every few weeks is here too, his cart a treasure trove of exotic items from distant towns. But the market seems oddly subdued today, and not just because of the snow. There's a tension in the air that you can't immediately place. The ordeal, your father murmurs, nodding toward the church where a small crowd has already gathered despite the early hour. They're preparing. Sure enough, the parish priest stands outside the church door, deep in conversation with the manor's bailiff. Near them, a brazier has been set up, flames already dancing inside it. Even from this distance, you can see the iron rod protruding from the coals, its tip beginning to glow red. Your stomach tightens. The 3 poachers will face their judgment soon, their flesh pressed against that glowing metal in a test of divine favour that few survive unscathed. "Come," your father says, pulling your attention back to the task at hand. "Let's trade quickly. I don't want to be here when they bring them out." You nod in agreement and follow him to the peddler's cart, where he already haggles with an older woman over the price of a small mirror, an unimaginable luxury that costs more than your family would spend on food in a month. The peddler himself is a thin, wiry man with a perpetual squint and quick, darting eyes that miss nothing. His name is Bartholomew, though most simply call him Bart. He travels a circuit of villages in the region, bringing goods from towns and news from everywhere. "Ah, young Thomas," he greets you with a familiarity born of years of trading. "And Master Edward, what brings you to my humble cart today? Perhaps a ribbon for the lady of the house?" or a fine bone comb for the young girl? Your father is immune to such sales tactics. Salt, he says simply, and thread, if you have it. Bart's smile doesn't waver as he reaches beneath his cart. I have the finest salt from the coast, he says, producing a small cloth bag. Perfect for preserving. And thread? What colour does the good wife desire? Whatever is cheapest, your father replies pragmatically. As your father negotiates with Bart, your attention wanders back to the church where the crowd has grown. The ordeal will be a public spectacle, as justice always is in medieval England. Everyone will watch as the accused men place their palms against hot iron and take the required steps, their flesh sizzling, the smell of burning meat carrying across the village green. The memory of it will serve as both entertainment and warning. 3 silver pennies for both, Bart says, drawing your attention back. Your father's face hardens. Highway robbery, he mutters. 2 and not a farthing more. Bart sighs dramatically. I have children to feed, same as you, Master Edward. The roads are dangerous in winter, and salt doesn't transport itself. 2.5, and I'm cutting my own throat at that price. The haggling continues for several minutes, a dance both men know well. Eventually, they settle on 2 silver pennies and one of the rabbit furs. Your father hands over the precious coin, carefully wrapped in a scrap of cloth to prevent loss, and tucks the salt and thread into his belt pouch. Any news from beyond? He asks Bart, as he always does. In a world without newspapers or regular postal service, travellers like Bart are the primary source of information from the wider world. Bart glances around, then leans closer. Strange sickness in Blackwood, he says quietly. Started last week. People dancing in the streets, they say. Can't stop themselves. Some till they drop dead. Your father's brow furrows. Dancing sickness? You mean like the St. Vitus dance? Bart nods. Similar, though worse from what I hear. Some foaming at the mouth, seeing things that aren't there, whole families afflicted. A chill that has nothing to do with the winter cold runs down your spine. You've heard tales of such maladies, people seized by uncontrollable movements, dancing themselves to exhaustion, even death. Some say it's demonic possession, others blame poisoned air or contaminated water. Started after they ate the new rye bread, they say. Bart adds, his voice barely above a whisper now. Baker ground it fresh. By nightfall, half the village was dancing like madmen. Ergot. The word isn't spoken, but it hangs in the air between the adults. You've heard of it, a black fungus that sometimes grows on rye in damp conditions. When ground into flour and baked into bread, it can drive entire communities mad with visions and uncontrollable movements. That's less than a day's walk from here, your father says, his voice tight with concern. Your village grows rye too, stores it in the same conditions, grinds it at the same mill. I'd check your stores if I were you, Bart says, already turning to another customer. Black spots like little fingers, can't miss it if you know to look. Your father nods grimly, and you can see the mental calculation happening behind his eyes. Your family's rye stores, carefully harvested and preserved to last the winter, might now represent not salvation but danger. We should go, he says to you, already turning away from the market. The honey and remaining furs will have to wait for another day. This news takes precedence. But before you can leave, a commotion erupts near the church. The crowd parts as the 3 poachers are led out, their hands bound before them, faces pale with fear and cold. The priest follows, carrying a Bible and wearing his ceremonial vestments. Behind him, an altar boy swings a censer, filling the air with the sharp scent of incense. Despite your father's desire to leave, you both find yourselves frozen in place, watching the grim procession. The entire market has gone still, all eyes drawn to the unfolding spectacle of medieval justice. The poachers are led to the brazier, where the iron rod now glows a bright, angry red. The bailiff reads the charges in a loud, formal voice: trespassing on the king's land, taking the king's deer, resisting arrest. The penalty would normally be hanging, he explains, but in his mercy, the Lord has granted them the chance to prove their innocence through ordeal. If God finds them innocent, their wounds will heal clean, the bailiff concludes. If guilty, the wounds will fester and justice will be done. The priest steps forward, sprinkling holy water on the glowing iron and murmuring Latin prayers. This is no mere physical test, it's a spiritual one, calling upon divine judgment to reveal the truth that human authorities cannot discern on their own. The first poacher is brought forward, Will Fletcher, the tall man with 5 children. His face is a mask of terror as the ropes binding his wrists are cut. The bailiff explains the test. He must grasp the iron rod, carry it 3 paces, then place it on the ground. His hand will then be bandaged and sealed with the church's wax. In 3 days, the bandages will be removed and God's judgment revealed. Will looks out at the crowd, perhaps searching for familiar faces or simply trying to find courage in the moment. His eyes meet yours briefly, and in that moment you see not a criminal, but a desperate man facing an impossible choice. The priest offers final prayers, then nods to the bailiff. 2 men-at-arms hold Will's arms, preventing any last-minute attempt to flee. The bailiff gestures to the glowing iron. "Take it," he commands. Will's hand shakes violently as he reaches for the rod. A collective breath is held throughout the crowd. Then, with a strangled cry, he grasps the iron. The sizzle of burning flesh is audible even where you stand. The smell follows a moment later, acrid, stomach-turning. Will screams, a primal sound of agony that cuts through the winter air like a knife. "Walk," the bailiff commands. Somehow, incredibly, Will takes 1 step, then another. His face is contorted in agony, tears streaming down his cheeks. The iron has already burned through the first layers of his palm, cauterizing blood vessels even as it destroys nerve endings. 3 steps. He drops the iron, falling to his knees in the snow, cradling his ruined hand against his chest and rocking back and forth in wordless agony. The priest immediately steps forward, applying a salve of oil and herbs to the wound before wrapping it in clean linen bandages. The wax seal is applied, ensuring the bandage remains undisturbed until the appointed time for examination. You turn away, unable to watch as the second poacher is brought forward. Your father's hand on your shoulder guides you away from the scene, back toward your home at the edge of the village. "Barbaric," he mutters, though quietly enough that only you can hear. Criticism of justice, like criticism of the church or the Lord, is dangerous even when justified. As you walk, your thoughts are a jumble of horror at what you've witnessed and fear about Bart's news from Blackwood. The dancing, sickness, ergot poisoning is no small matter. Entire villages have been wiped out when their rye stores were contaminated. Your home comes into view, smoke rising steadily from the hole in the thatch. Before entering, your father stops at the small lean-to attached to the main structure, where the family's grain is stored in wooden barrels. He digs through the snow that's drifted against the door and pulls it open. Inside, the space is cold but dry, essential for preventing the very problem you now fear. Your father lifts the lid off the rye barrel and scoops a handful of the dark grains onto his palm. "Bring it to the light," he says, and you follow him back out into the snow. In the winter daylight, he carefully examines the grains, turning them over with one finger. "There," he says finally, holding up a single grain for you to see. Even to your untrained eye, the difference is obvious. Instead of the normal rye kernel, this one is elongated, blackened, slightly curved like a tiny witch's finger. Ergot. "How bad?" you ask, your voice barely above a whisper. Your father doesn't answer immediately, returning to the storage lean-to to examine more of the rye. When he emerges again, his expression is grim. "Bad enough," he says. "We can't use this barrel, maybe not any of the rye. The implications hit you like a physical blow. The rye represents nearly half your family's winter food stores. Without it, surviving until spring becomes an open question rather than a challenging certainty." Your father sees the fear on your face. "We'll manage," he says, with more confidence than he likely feels. "We still have barley and dried peas. Your mother can stretch it further than you'd think possible." Inside the hut, the news is received with the stoic practicality that characterizes your family's approach to all crises. Your mother simply nods, already calculating new ratios for the pottage pot. Your sister asks if the bad rye can be fed to the animals. "No," your father says firmly. "We'll burn it. Today. The sickness affects beasts as well as men." "What about Thomas Baker's boy?" you ask, remembering yesterday's emergency. "The fever," your mother shakes her head. "Dead before midnight," she says, making the sign of the cross. "Buried this morning early." Another small wooden cross in the churchyard, another family devastated by winter's hardships. You say a small prayer for Thomas and his wife, now childless in a world where children are both blessing and insurance against an uncertain future. As your father prepares to burn the contaminated rye, a painful waste of food but necessary, your mother takes stock of the remaining stores. The calculations are grim but not hopeless, with careful rationing and a bit of luck with the snares and fishing nets. You might make it to spring when fresh greens begin to appear. "The honey," she says suddenly, remembering the trading goods you took to market. "Did you sell it?" You shake your head. "No time. The ordeal started, and then we heard about the sickness in Blackwood." She nods, unsurprised. "Good. We may need it ourselves now." Honey is more than a sweetener in medieval England. It's medicine, preservative, and in desperate times, a source of quick energy when nothing else is available. Your mother has used it to treat wounds, soothe coughs, and preserve summer berries for winter consumption. The rest of the day passes in a flurry of activity centered on food security. The contaminated rye is carefully burned in the central hearth, each handful accompanied by a small prayer for protection. The remaining food stores are checked for any signs of mold or rot. The snares are reset in new locations, and your father even breaks the ice on the village pond to try his luck with the fishing net, a largely unsuccessful effort that yields only 2 small fish barely worth the energy expended to catch them. By late afternoon, word of Blackwood's affliction has spread through the entire village. The priest calls for special prayers during evening vespers, and most villagers attend despite the cold and snow. Medieval life exists at the intersection of practical action and spiritual supplication. You do everything physically possible to survive while simultaneously appealing to divine protection. "They say 3 have died already in Blackwood," whispers Anne, the tanner's wife, as the village gathers in the small stone church, dancing themselves to death, foaming at the mouth like rabid dogs. "Demons," suggests the blacksmith's apprentice, his young face serious beneath his soot-stained cap. "My grandmother saw the same in her village as a girl, said the whole place had to be blessed by the bishop himself before it stopped." The priest overhears this speculation and frowns. "Not demons," he corrects firmly, "though the devil may work through natural means. It's the grain, corrupted by poor storage or bad harvesting. God sends us trials, but also the wisdom to overcome them." It's a surprisingly practical view from a man whose life revolves around spiritual matters, but not unusual in medieval times. The division between natural and supernatural explanations isn't as clear-cut as it will become in later centuries. The priest can believe simultaneously in demonic forces and contaminated grain without seeing any contradiction. After prayers, the village headman calls for a meeting in the churchyard. Despite the cold, most adults remain to discuss the twin threats now facing the community: the dancing sickness from Blackwood and the spotted fever that took Thomas's son. "We must check all grain stores," the headman announces. "Anything suspect must be burned, not sold or traded. This sickness spreads through food, not air like the fever." There are murmurs of discontent at this. Burning food in winter feels like madness, but no one openly objects. The dancing sickness is too terrifying a prospect to risk. "What of those who have no other stores?" asks a widow, whose meagre provisions are well known in the village. "I've nothing but rye to last till spring." This prompts a moment of uncomfortable silence. Medieval charity exists, but it's limited by the fact that everyone lives close to subsistence. "The church has stores," the priest says finally. "Not much, but enough to help those in greatest need, and perhaps the Lord might open his granary for a fair price." Few believe this last suggestion will bear fruit, but no one says so aloud. The Lord's generosity rarely extends to reduced prices, even in times of crisis. As darkness falls, you walk home with your family, the church bells ringing the end of day behind you. The village settles into its evening routine. Fires built up for the night, animals fed their meagre winter rations, prayers said for protection through the cold darkness. Inside your hut, the evening meal is noticeably smaller than usual. A thin pottage with more water than substance, a harder sacrifice to bear after witnessing the ordeal and learning of the contaminated rye. But it's hot, and there's enough to take the edge off hunger, which is more than some can say. "Will we have enough?" your sister asks as she scrapes the last bits from her wooden bowl. At 12, she's old enough to understand the precariousness of your situation, but young enough to still voice the fears adults have learned to keep silent. Your mother's hand gently smooths her hair. "God provides," she says simply. "We've weathered worse winters." Whether this is true or merely the comfort a mother offers her children is hard to say. Memory has a way of softening past hardships once they're survived, while present dangers always loom largest. As night deepens, the family settles into sleep positions around the central hearth. Father and mother on one side, children on the other, grandmother in the warmest spot nearest the embers. The pig and goat shift in their corner, their animal heat a welcome addition to the hut's warmth. Outside, snow continues to fall, adding another layer to the white blanket covering the village. Inside, your family sleeps the sleep of the medieval poor, alert to danger even in rest, bodies never fully relaxing after a lifetime of hard labour and uncertainty. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, more food to find, more work to complete, more dangers to avoid. But for now, there is the simple miracle of another day survived, another night of shelter against the unforgiving medieval winter. You wake with a start, confused for a moment about the time. The hut is dark except for the glow of embers, and everyone remains asleep around you. It takes a moment to realise what happened. You've experienced what medieval people call first sleep. The practice of sleeping in two distinct segments is normal in your world. Without candles to burn through the long winter nights, most people go to bed shortly after sunset, sleep for several hours, then wake naturally in the middle of the night. This wakeful period, lasting an hour or more, is followed by second sleep until dawn. You sit up carefully, trying not to disturb the others. The fire has burned down to glowing coals, casting just enough light to make out the sleeping forms of your family. Your father's breathing is deep and steady, one arm protectively draped over your mother. Your sister and youngest brother are curled together like puppies, sharing warmth. Grandmother's soft snores punctuate the quiet. This middle-of-the-night waking isn't considered insomnia in medieval times. It's a normal, even useful part of the daily rhythm. Some use it for prayer, others for quiet contemplation. Married couples often take advantage of this private time for intimacy. Craftsmen sometimes work by the dim firelight, making small items or repairs. For you, it's a rare moment of solitude in a life where privacy is almost non-existent. You add a small piece of wood to the embers, careful not to make noise. The flames catch slowly, throwing slightly more light around the single-room dwelling. In that gentle illumination, you take stock of your home with fresh eyes. It's humble by any standard, walls of wattle and daub, twigs woven together and covered with a mixture of clay, straw and dung, a roof of thatch, a packed earth floor covered partially with rushes. There are no windows except the small opening covered with stretched bladder skin. The smoke hole in the roof serves as both chimney and limited ventilation. Yet this simple structure keeps your family alive through brutal winters. Without it, you would surely perish. The awareness of this basic fact, shelter equals survival, shapes how medieval people view their homes. They are not status symbols or expressions of personality. They are survival tools, as vital as food and water. The quiet is broken by your father stirring. He sits up, unsurprised to see you awake. This middle night vigil is familiar to him too. "Can't sleep?" he whispers, moving carefully around the sleeping forms to join you by the fire. You shrug. "Just woke up." He nods, understanding. "Good time to think," he says, poking gently at the small flame. "Or pray." For a while, you sit in companionable silence. Words are often unnecessary between people who work side by side every day of their lives. The quiet itself feels like a luxury after days filled with labour and evenings crowded with family. "Thomas came by while you were checking snares," your father finally says. "Wanted to thank you for working his section of the pit yesterday. Said he won't forget it." You nod, surprised and touched. Thomas Baker has nothing to give as thanks. His only child dead, his household still at risk from the spotted fever. Yet the acknowledgement itself is valuable in a community where reputation and goodwill are forms of currency. "How is his wife?" you ask. Your father sighs. "As you'd expect. The priest is with her most days, praying." Another silence falls, both of you contemplating the fragility of life in medieval England. Children die frequently from disease, accident, hunger, yet each loss tears at the fabric of family and community. No matter how common, it never becomes easy. "The poacher's ordeal," you say after a while. "Do you think—" "Best not to talk of it," your father interrupts gently. "What's done is done. Justice belongs to God and the king." You understand his caution. Questioning justice is dangerous, even in the privacy of your home. Walls are thin, and medieval communities are dense with relationships and rivalries. Words have a way of travelling. As if reading your thoughts, your father adds, "Old Edwin claims he knew Will Fletcher's father, says they served together in the Lord's militia years ago, before you were born." This is your father's way of sharing information without expressing a direct opinion. The connection humanizes the poacher, making him more than just a criminal facing ordeal. He becomes part of the village's complex web of relationships and history. The fire pops and shifts, sending a small shower of sparks upward. Outside, the snow has stopped and the night is eerily silent. Your father takes a small knife from his belt and a piece of wood from beside the hearth. Without speaking, he begins to carve small, precise cuts that gradually shape the wood into a crude but recognizable bird. This is how medieval people often spend their winter evenings and night wakings, in simple crafts that require little light. Women spin thread or mend clothing. Men carve wood or repair tools. Even children learn to make simple objects: dolls from straw, balls from rags, slings from leather scraps. "Remember what I taught you about the stars?" your father asks unexpectedly, his hands never pausing in their work. You nod. The stars are vital navigational tools, especially for those who must sometimes travel between villages. Your father has taught you to find north using the pole star, to estimate time by the movement of familiar constellations, to predict weather by certain patterns of starlight. Good, he says. Knowledge outlasts tools, can't be stolen or broken. Remember that? This is as close as your father comes to philosophy, practical wisdom distilled from a lifetime of survival. Medieval education for common people isn't found in books or schools, but in these moments of transmitted knowledge, passed from generation to generation through direct experience. "I should check the animals," he says, setting aside his half-finished carving. The household pig and goat need occasional attention even at night, especially in cold weather. While he tends to them, you remain by the fire, enjoying the rare moment of warmth and relative comfort. Medieval life offers few such respites, brief pauses in the constant work of survival. Your father returns, bringing a fresh blast of cold air that makes the fire flicker. "Snow's stopped," he reports. "Stars are bright. Will be colder tomorrow." This weather report is delivered not as idle conversation, but as vital information. Tomorrow's temperature will determine everything from what work can be done to how much food needs to be consumed to maintain body heat. In a world without thermometers or weather forecasts, reading natural signs is an essential skill. "We should sleep," he says, already moving back to his place beside your mother. "Dawn comes early." You nod, banking the fire carefully to preserve the embers through the rest of the night. As you settle back onto your straw-filled mattress, you feel the rhythm of medieval nights working its familiar pattern. First sleep, waking, second sleep, dawn. A cycle as old as humanity, only recently forgotten in a world of artificial light and regulated hours. Sleep comes quickly, your body accustomed to this brief middle-night waking. The last thing you see before closing your eyes is the gentle rise and fall of your family's breathing, each life precious in its fragility, each breath a small victory against the harsh medieval winter. Dawn arrives with the distant sound of the church bell calling the village to prime, the first prayer service of the day. Inside your hut, the family stirs slowly to life, bodies reluctant to leave the relative warmth of shared sleeping spaces. The fire, carefully banked overnight, needs only gentle coaxing to resume its vital work. Today promises to be slightly different from yesterday. With the Lord's storage pit buried under snow and the fields similarly inaccessible, the village turns to indoor work and community activities. For your family, this means joining others in the village hall. a simple timber structure near the church where villagers gather for meetings, celebrations, and shared winter tasks. "Bring the wool," your mother instructs your sister, pointing to the basket of raw fleece that's been waiting to be processed, and the spindle. Wool processing is communal work in winter, when multiple hands make the tedious task more bearable. Women and girls from throughout the village will gather to card, spin, and eventually weave the raw wool into fabric that's vital for everything from clothing to bedding. Your father and brothers will join the men in repairing tools, making candles from saved animal fat, and carving needed implements for spring planting. This sexual division of labour is rigid in medieval England. Certain tasks belong exclusively to men, others to women, with little crossover except in emergencies. The walk to the village hall is easier today, with paths trampled through yesterday's snow by earlier risers. The sky is brilliantly clear, the sun dazzling as it reflects off the white landscape. The temperature has dropped further, just as your father predicted, making each breath painful in your lungs. Smoke rises from every dwelling, creating a low haze over the village. The church stands at the centre, its stone walls and modest bell tower representing the most substantial building most villagers will ever enter. Beside it, the village hall buzzes with activity already, voices and occasional laughter spilling out into the cold morning. Inside, warmth hits you like a physical force. Multiple fires burn in the long open room, and bodies press together on simple benches arranged around the perimeter. The hall isn't fancy, dirt floor, timber walls, thatch roof, but compared to individual dwellings, it's positively grand, capable of holding most of the village's adult population. Your family separates naturally, mother and sister joining the women at one end, father and brothers moving toward the men at the other. You, at 15, occupy that in-between space of late childhood, still learning from both sides before settling fully into adult male responsibilities. "Thomas, come help with these candles," calls John Cooper, motioning you toward a table where tallow, rendered animal fat, is being carefully melted in a small pot over coals. Steady hands make straight candles. You join him, grateful for the inclusion. Candle making is skilled work, creating precious light sources that most families can afford only for special occasions or emergencies. The process is slow and precise, repeated dipping of wicks into the melted tallow, allowing each layer to cool and harden before the next dip. As you work, conversation flows around you. Unlike modern social gatherings centered on entertainment or structured activities, medieval community time revolves around productive work made more pleasant through company. "Heard anything more from Blackwood?" John asks quietly as you carefully dip a row of hanging wicks. You shake your head. "Nothing since yesterday's news." "My cousin lives near there," offers William, the carpenter's apprentice working beside you. "Says 3 more fell to the dancing sickness last night. That makes 6 dead." A murmur passes through the nearby men. 6 deaths in a village roughly the size of your own represents a significant portion of the population, particularly troubling in winter when replacing lost labour is impossible. "Did they burn their grain?" asks another man. William nods. Everything suspect. Still didn't help those already sick. The conversation shifts to other topics. Speculation about when the Lord will demand work on the storage pit resume, discussion of repairs needed for the village mill, debates about the best time to begin preparing fields once the snow melts. Through it all, hands remain busy. Men carve wooden tools, repair leather harnesses, twist straw into thatch bundles for spring repairs, and fashion new arrows for hunting. No one sits idle. Idleness is an unaffordable luxury in a world where survival depends on constant preparation. At the women's end of the hall, a different kind of productivity unfolds. The rhythmic whir of spinning wheels and the soft thwack of carding paddles create a backdrop for feminine conversation. Women discuss child rearing, food preservation techniques, herbal remedies, and household management. Vital knowledge passed from mother to daughter, neighbour to neighbour. Midday brings a communal meal, not a feast by any standard, but a pleasant change from eating only with immediate family. Each household contributes something small to the pot: a handful of dried vegetables, a few pieces of salt fish, a portion of precious grain. Together these meagre offerings become a substantial pottage that fills the hall with savoury steam. The village priest blesses the food before eating begins. His role extends far beyond Sunday services and occasional sacraments. He is teacher, record keeper, mediator, and moral authority, one of the few villagers with any formal education, however limited by modern standards. "Any word of the poachers, Father?" someone asks as wooden bowls are distributed for the meal. The priest's face remains carefully neutral. "They rest and pray," he says. "God's judgment will be revealed in 2 days' time." No one presses for details. The 3 men, their bandaged hands sealed with the church's wax, are being kept in a small room attached to the church. Not quite prisoners, not quite patients, but somewhere in between as they await divine verdict on their wounds. As the communal meal winds down, the hall's atmosphere shifts subtly. The practical work of the morning gives way to afternoon storytelling, a vital part of medieval entertainment and education combined. With daylight precious and physical energy limited by winter's challenges, tales provide both diversion and instruction with minimal expenditure of resources. "Master Edward," calls Anne, the tanner's wife. "Surely you remember the tale of Sir Gareth and the Green Knight? The children would love to hear it again." Your father looks momentarily uncomfortable with the attention, but medieval communities expect each member to contribute their talents to the common good. His skill as a storyteller is well known, having been passed down from his own father. "Well," he begins, settling on a bench where the hall's largest fire casts dramatic shadows across his weathered face. "It happened in the days of good King Arthur, when England was young and magic still walked openly among us. Children abandoned their small tasks to gather at his feet, eyes wide with anticipation. Adults continue their work, but tilt their heads to listen, momentarily transported from the harsh realities of medieval winter to a world of knights, honour, and clear moral choices." Your father's voice takes on a different quality as he tells the tale, deeper, more confident, almost musical in its cadence. This is oral tradition at its finest, stories preserved not in books, which few can read, but in memory and voice, passed from generation to generation with small variations that keep them alive and relevant. "The Green Knight was taller than any mortal man," he continues, his hands gesturing to indicate impossible height, his skin and beard as green as summer leaves, his eyes burning like emerald fire. You've heard this story dozens of times, yet it never loses its power. The children gasp at the description, already captivated. Even the adults smile with anticipation of favourite parts to come. As the tale unfolds, the mysterious challenge, the beheading that doesn't kill, the year-long quest, the final test of honour, you observe how perfectly it embodies medieval values. Courage, faith, honesty and loyalty are rewarded. Pride, deception and cowardice are punished. The moral is clear without being stated explicitly. Virtue leads to salvation, sin to destruction. When the story concludes with Sir Gareth's triumph and return to Camelot, the hall erupts in appreciative murmurs. For a brief time, the cold, hunger, and constant work have been forgotten, replaced by the warmth of shared experience and cultural connection. Other stories follow, some heroic like Your Father's Tale, others humorous or cautionary. An old woman recounts how St. Cuthbert protected travellers in a terrible storm. The blacksmith tells a bawdy tale of a merchant tricked by his clever wife, earning roars of laughter from adults and confused looks from children. The priest contributes a parable about charity that serves as both entertainment and gentle reminder of Christian duty. Through it all, work continues. Hands card wool, repair tools, mend clothing, and prepare materials for tomorrow's tasks. Medieval productivity rarely pauses completely, even during leisure. As afternoon fades toward evening, families begin gathering their things to return home. Precious daylight is waning, and each household must tend to animals, prepare evening meals, and secure dwellings before full darkness falls. The community time has been valuable, both practically and socially, but individual survival still demands the majority of attention. Your family walks home together through the blue shadows of late afternoon. The temperature continues to drop as the sun sinks toward the horizon, and breath hangs in the air like small personal clouds. No one speaks much. Energy conservation becomes instinctive in extreme cold. At home, the evening routine unfolds with practiced efficiency. Your father and brothers check snares and fishing lines, yielding one small rabbit today, a welcome addition to the evening pottage. Your mother and sister tend the fire and prepare the meal, stretching limited ingredients with skill born of necessity. Grandmother sorts through dried herbs hanging from the rafters, selecting those needed for both cooking and simple medicines. This division of labour isn't just cultural, it's survival strategy. Each person has specific responsibilities that, when completed properly, maximise the household's chances of making it through another day. The evening meal is simple but sufficient. Barley pottage enriched with the rabbit and a handful of dried vegetables preserved from summer's garden. Everyone receives a roughly equal portion, though you notice your mother taking slightly less than others. This quiet self-sacrifice is common among medieval parents, particularly in winter when food is scarce. As darkness claims the village completely, your family settles around the central hearth for the day's final activities. Medieval evenings are necessarily limited by light. Precious candles and lamp oil are saved for emergencies or special occasions. Most households rely entirely on firelight after sunset. In this gentle, flickering illumination, quiet handwork continues. Your father returns to his carving from the previous night. Your mother and sister. Between 1066 and 1485, over 20 million English peasants lived their entire lives without ever sleeping on a real bed, bathing regularly, or travelling more than 10 miles from where they were born. Disease was rampant, violence was commonplace, and survival was never guaranteed. Here's what life was really like in medieval England. Before the story, if these help you sleep, like or subscribe would be cool. Also drop where you're listening from and the time. I check the comments and it's crazy seeing people from like Australia and Norway on the same video. We're heading to medieval England in a minute. First though, get comfortable. Seriously, take a second. Adjust whatever needs adjusting. You're not going to want to move once we start. Your eyes crack open to complete darkness. The smell hits you first. Smoke from last night's fire, unwashed bodies, and the unmistakable reek of the animal pen just outside. You're lying on a straw-filled pallet on the packed dirt floor of a one-room cottage. The year is 1248, and you've just woken up in an English peasant village. The straw mattress pokes through the threadbare wool blanket, jabbing into your back. Something's crawling across your arm, probably fleas, actually definitely fleas. Medieval England is basically a flea paradise. Everyone has them, kings have them, the Archbishop of Canterbury has them, you've got them, they're just part of life. Your entire family is still asleep around you, all piled together on the floor for warmth. Personal space, not a thing in medieval times. Privacy? Forget about it. Everyone sleeps in the same room, does everything in full view of each other. The concept of privacy won't be invented for, another 500 years. It's cold, see your breath cold. The fire in the central hearth has died down to embers overnight. Getting that fire going again is literally your first survival task of the day. No fire means no warmth, no cooking, no survival. Unlike your temperature-controlled bedroom with its cosy thermostat, heat in medieval England is never a guarantee. Is it morning yet? Your youngest sister whispers, her small body shivering against yours. Almost, you murmur back. Can you hear the cockerel? When that rooster crows, your day begins whether you want it to or not. The darkness outside suggests it's just before dawn, maybe around 4:30 in the morning during summer. No sleeping in, ever. Medieval peasants rise before the sun, work until it sets, then collapse into exhausted sleep. Your stomach growls painfully. You're always at least a little hungry. That's just the default state of being for about 90% of the population in this time. The gnawing emptiness in your belly is so constant you barely notice it anymore. I should mention here that historians estimate the average medieval peasant consumed between 1,500 and 2,500 calories daily, but those calories came almost entirely from bread and ale. Imagine eating basically nothing but bread and drinking weak beer for most of your life. That's medieval nutrition for you. You carefully extract yourself from the pile of sleeping bodies and move to the hearth. Rekindling the fire is delicate work. If you fail, you might have to go to a neighbour's house to borrow embers, which is embarrassing and costs you precious time. You kneel down and gently blow on the remaining coals, adding tiny scraps of dried straw and the smallest twigs. The ember glows brighter. A wisp of smoke curls upward. You hold your breath as a small flame appears, catches and grows. Thank God. No, literally, thank God. In medieval England, even getting a fire started successfully is considered divine intervention. Everything in your life is filtered through religion. Every moment, every action, every thought occurs within the framework of an all-powerful God who's judging your every move. Got the fire going? Your father grunts, sitting up on his own straw pallet. He's 40 years old, which makes him ancient by medieval standards. Half his teeth are gone, his back is permanently stooped from decades of field work, and he's probably got at least 3 untreated chronic conditions that nobody has names for yet. Yes, father, you respond, feeding the precious flame with slightly larger sticks. Most men in your village don't live past 45. Women often die even younger, frequently in childbirth. Child mortality? Let's not even go there. The fact that your youngest sister made it to age 5 is legitimately impressive. You can probably hear a baby crying somewhere in the village right now. Statistically speaking, that kid has maybe a 50-50 shot of seeing its 10th birthday. Your mother stirs now, immediately transitioning from sleep to work without a pause. There is no such thing as me time in medieval England. No self-care Sundays, no reading in bed with a cup of tea. You wake up and you work until you sleep again. That's the deal. The bucket's empty, your mother says, reaching for the household's single water vessel. We'll need water for the porridge. This is your cue. You're on water duty this morning, which means a quarter-mile walk to the village well. You grab the wooden bucket, mentally preparing yourself for the early morning chill. Wait, I should point out something that might surprise you. Medieval people weren't actually afraid of water itself, contrary to some myths. They just bathed way less frequently than we do, maybe a few times a year. They'd wash hands and faces somewhat regularly, but full body immersion? Special occasions only. You step outside into the pre-dawn gloom. The ground is muddy beneath your feet. You're not wearing shoes, by the way. Peasant children often went barefoot most of the time. Even in cold weather, shoes are expensive. You might get a pair for winter, but they'll be uncomfortable. Wooden clogs or simple leather wrappings. Nothing like the cushioned, supportive footwear keeping your feet cozy right now. The village consists of maybe 30 similar one-room cottages clustered around a muddy central path. Smoke rises from a few chimneys. Someone's cow moos mournfully from a nearby pen. The air smells of wood smoke, manure, and the peculiar earthy dampness that seems permanent in England. As you walk toward the well, you pass the village's open drainage ditch, basically a small stream of sewage running through the centre of the settlement. The concept of sanitation as we understand it doesn't exist. People throw waste into the streets and let rain wash it away. Or not. The smell in summer can be overwhelming. "Watch yourself, boy," a voice calls out as you nearly collide with the village reeve, the man who oversees work on the Lord's lands. He's already up and about, planning the day's labour. "You're on ploughing duty today. North Field. Don't be late or it'll be the switch for you." You nod respectfully, keeping your eyes down. Hierarchy is everything in medieval society. Everyone has their place, and stepping out of it has consequences. The reeve might be a peasant like you, but he has authority, and authority is to be respected always. At the well, you lower your bucket on its rope, hearing the distant splash when it hits water. As you begin to crank it back up, another villager joins you, Agnes, the miller's daughter. You've known her your entire life, which isn't saying much since neither of you has ever left this village. "Morning," she says, yawning. "Heard the wolves last night." "Again?" you ask, suddenly alert. "How close?" "Thomas says they got one of his sheep," she replies, "just outside the palisade." This is concerning news. Wolves, bears and wild boars are genuine threats in medieval England. The countryside isn't the romantic pastoral landscape of fairy tales. It's partially wilderness, filled with dangers both animal and human. Speaking of human dangers, banditry is common on the roads between villages. Another reason people rarely travel far from home. The King's Peace is a concept, not a reality for most ordinary folks. Justice is haphazard at best. You haul up your filled bucket, the weight of it straining your arms. Clean, fresh water, one of the most precious resources in your world. The village well is communal, one of the few things shared by all. If it ever dried up or became contaminated, it would be catastrophic. Your family will use this single bucket of water carefully throughout the morning, for cooking porridge, for washing faces, for cleaning essential items. Nothing gets wasted. The modern concept of turning on a tap and having unlimited clean water would seem like inconceivable magic to you. You look up at the sky as you walk back. The first hint of dawn is breaking, a faint lightening at the horizon. Birds are beginning their morning chorus, and the village is coming to life around you. More smoke rises from chimneys. Children appear in doorways. A pig squeals as it's shooed out of someone's garden patch. "Did you hear about old Wat?" A woman's voice drifts from a nearby cottage. "Found him dead in his bed yesterday, just didn't wake up." "God rest him," replies another voice. "That's the third this month. Must be the bad air." Death is an everyday companion in medieval England, not an abstract concept or something hidden away in hospitals and funeral homes. It's right here, constantly, in your face. People die young, they die suddenly, they die from things we could easily treat today. A cut might kill you if it gets infected. A bad tooth could lead to your death. Winter itself is a deadly season for the very young and old. Back at your cottage, your mother takes the water and pours some into the family's only cooking pot, which hangs over the now crackling fire. Breakfast will be pottage, a thick porridge made from whatever grain is available, maybe flavoured with herbs if you're lucky. Meat is rare, perhaps appearing on your table once a week at most. Your father is pulling on his boots now, actual leather boots, which marks him as not the poorest person in the village. He'll head out to the fields soon, where he'll work until dusk. You'll join him after you've eaten, spending the day behind a heavy wooden plough. Church bell, your mother notes as the distant sound of the parish bell reaches your ears. The church marks time in medieval life, dividing the day into canonical hours. Most peasants can't tell time in the way we understand it. There are no clocks in homes. Your day is structured by bells, sunlight, and the rhythm of necessary tasks. As your mother stirs the bubbling pottage, you realise how different her face looks compared to modern women her age. She's perhaps 35, but looks 60 by our standards. Hard work, multiple pregnancies, poor nutrition, and no healthcare have taken their toll. Her teeth are worn down, her back bent, her hands gnarled with early arthritis. "Will Father Martin give out alms today?" your sister asks hopefully, referring to the village priest. "Perhaps," your mother answers, though her tone suggests otherwise, "if the Lord's tithe was generous." The church is both spiritual guide and practical authority in your life. The local priest is likely the only literate person you regularly encounter. You, like about 99% of the population, cannot read or write. Information comes to you orally through sermons, proclamations, and stories passed down through generations. Your older brother enters the cottage, having already been out feeding the family's most valuable possession, a single milk cow tethered behind your home. If the cow stays healthy, you have milk and cheese. If it dies, your family faces potential starvation. "The bailiff's coming today," he announces grimly. "Tax collection." A collective groan fills the small space. Taxes in medieval England aren't annual forms you file. They're men who show up and demand payment, sometimes taking it by force. Your family owes taxes to both the lord of the manor and the church, typically about 10% of everything you produce. Failure to pay can result in punishment or imprisonment. "We'll need to hide some of the grain," your father mutters. Tax evasion. It's a medieval tradition too, though getting caught could mean a whipping or worse. The porridge is ready, and your mother spoons it into wooden bowls, the family's only dishes. No plates, no cups, no cutlery beyond perhaps a single knife that everyone shares. You eat with your fingers, or perhaps a wooden spoon, sitting on the floor or on simple stools. The porridge is bland and lumpy, but it's hot and filling. You won't eat again until midday, when you might have bread and ale in the fields. The concept of 3 square meals didn't exist. Medieval peasants typically ate 2 meals daily, with the larger one at midday during their brief rest from labour. As you eat, you notice your youngest sister scratching vigorously at her scalp. Lice, another constant companion in medieval life. Nearly everyone has them, along with the fleas I mentioned earlier. Personal hygiene as we understand it doesn't exist and wouldn't necessarily help much given the general conditions. "Stop scratching at table," your mother scolds, though table is a generous term for the rough wooden board balanced across 2 logs where the porridge pot sits. "It itches," the girl complains. "We'll check for nits tonight," your mother promises, which means the excruciating process of having your hair combed with a fine-toothed comb to remove lice eggs. Medieval parents did care about their children's welfare. They just had very limited means to improve it. Outside, the village is fully awake now. Through the open door, you can see people moving about their morning routines, women carrying water or tending gardens, men heading to the fields with tools over their shoulders, children chasing chickens or pigs that have escaped their pens. Your father finishes his porridge and stands, stretching his aching back. "Time," he says simply. That single word means your brief morning respite is over. The sun is up, which means work begins in earnest. You quickly finish your food, grab your cap, a simple cloth head covering, and prepare to follow your father to the fields. Don't forget to take the offering to the church, your mother reminds you, handing over a small bundle containing a few eggs, your family's tithe for the week, another obligation that cannot be ignored no matter how poor you are. As you step outside again, the full reality of medieval English village life surrounds you. This is a world without privacy, without comfort, without security. Every day is a struggle for survival. Every season brings new challenges. Planting in spring, weeding in summer, harvesting in fall, simply staying alive in winter. Yet despite all this, medieval village life had a rhythm and community that's largely vanished from our modern world. These people facing hardship together created bonds we can scarcely imagine. Everyone knows everyone. Everyone depends on everyone else. The individualism we take for granted would seem alien and dangerous to your medieval self. The morning sun illuminates the village now, glinting off the dew-covered thatch of the cottages. Women gather at the well, sharing news and gossip. The medieval version of social media. Children play in the dirt with simple toys made from sticks and stones. A dog barks somewhere and chickens scatter in its path. You follow your father toward the north field where the day's labour awaits. Your back already aches in anticipation of the hours of ploughing ahead. But complaining isn't part of the medieval mindset. This is simply life, the only one you've ever known or expected to know. The church bell rings again, marking the hour of prime. Another day in medieval England has truly begun. Time to put your back into ensuring your family's survival for one more day in a world where nothing, not food, not health, not even tomorrow, can be taken for granted. Meanwhile, up on the hill overlooking your village stands the Lord's Manor House, a world away from your existence, though barely a mile distant. There, people are just waking to a very different kind of medieval life, but that's a story for another time. The weight of the wooden plough handle digs into your calloused palms as you reach the north field. The oxen low impatiently, their breath steaming in the morning air. Your father nods once, and together you begin the first furrow of the day, taking the first steps of what will be countless miles, walked behind this plough before the sun sets again. And as the heavy blade cuts into the soil, you can't help but glance up at the vast sky overhead, the same sky that people everywhere, in every time, have looked up at in moments of wonder or despair, the same sky that hangs above your bed right now as this medieval world slowly comes to life in your imagination. Up on the hill, in stark contrast to your muddy village below, morning arrives differently at Thornfield Manor. The Lord's residence isn't a castle. Those massive stone fortresses are for the truly wealthy nobles. No, this is a manor house, still impressive by your standards, but modest by aristocratic ones. Dawn filters through actual glass windows. Yes, glass, that impossibly expensive material that no peasant home would ever have. The pale light falls across a massive oak bed where Sir William de Thornfield stirs beneath layers of fine wool blankets and linen sheets. Unlike your straw pallet on the dirt floor, his bed stands on a wooden frame, raised off the ground, with a feather mattress that cost more than your entire family will earn in several years. Sir William doesn't wake to the smell of animal pens and smoke. His chamber smells of beeswax candles, herbs strewn across the floor rushes, and the lingering scent of last night's expensive imported incense. The manor still isn't what we'd call clean by modern standards. It's drafty, smoky, and yes, there are still plenty of fleas, but it's a world apart from village conditions. "My lord?" A quiet voice breaks the silence as a servant enters the chamber. This is Thomas, Sir William's personal attendant, already dressed and prepared for the day while his master is still abed. The hour grows late. Late, it's barely past dawn, but for the nobility, time works differently. While you've been up labouring since first light, the aristocracy typically rises later, one of the many privileges of rank. Sir William grunts, rolling over. He's 45 years old, ancient by peasant standards, but merely middle-aged for a nobleman with access to better nutrition and less physical labour. He has most of his teeth, though they're stained from wine and sweets. His hands have never gripped a plough, never planted crops, never done the hard physical labour that bends peasant backs by 30. "The bishop's messenger arrived at first light," Thomas continues, moving to open the wooden shutters wider. He awaits your response. This gets Sir William's attention. Church politics matter, especially to someone of his station. He sits up, revealing a linen nightshirt. Yes, medieval nobles had special clothes just for sleeping, unlike peasants who simply wore the same clothes day and night until they literally fell apart. "Bring wine," Sir William orders, running a hand through his thinning hair, "and summon Father Ambrose. I'll need his counsel before I meet this messenger." Thomas bows slightly and exits, leaving Sir William to his morning routine, which, I should mention, looks nothing like your own. There's no rush to rekindle fires or fetch water. Servants handle all that. The Lord's morning begins with being dressed by others. Yes, actually, dressed by servants, as if he were a child. Nobility didn't generally dress themselves if they could help it. While Thomas fetches wine, not water, mind you, but wine for breakfast, another servant enters with a silver basin and pitcher. Morning washing for nobility is slightly more thorough than for peasants, though still minimal by our standards. Sir William rinses his face and hands, then uses a cloth to dry himself. "Is Lady Eleanor awake?" he asks the servant. "Yes, my lord, in the solar with the children." Medieval noble marriages were primarily political and economic arrangements, though that doesn't mean affection was impossible. Sir William and Lady Eleanor have been married for 20 years, producing 4 living children, an impressive survival rate compared to peasant families. 2 sons and 2 daughters, ranging from 8 to 18 years of age. Thomas returns with wine in an actual glass goblet, another display of wealth. Most peasants drink from wooden cups or horn vessels. Glass and metal drinking vessels are status symbols. "The steward requests your guidance on the tax collection, my lord," Thomas says, as Sir William sips his morning wine. "There have been difficulties in the North Village. Your village. The difficulties likely mean your neighbours can't pay what's demanded without starving." Sir William frowns. "Again, send Morris with armed men. The taxes will be paid." And there it is, the casual cruelty of the medieval system. From Sir William's perspective, these aren't real hardships. Peasants are always complaining, always trying to keep more than their share. The fact that a bad harvest might mean actual starvation isn't his primary concern. "Shall I lay out the blue tunic or the embroidered brown?" Thomas asks, opening a massive oak chest that contains more clothes than your entire village owns collectively. "The blue. The bishop's man should be reminded of our status." This is how medieval nobility thought. Everything was a display, a performance of rank and power. The colour and quality of clothing instantly communicated your place in society. Sir William's blue tunic is dyed with expensive imported woad, decorated with fine needlework, and lined with squirrel fur. One outfit represents more wealth than most peasants would see in a lifetime. "They're saying Walter Miller is shorting the flour again," says another servant who's entered with a tray of bread and cheese, a light first meal before the main breakfast to come. "Have him brought up for the manor court next week," Sir William replies between bites. Another fine should remind him of his obligations. Manor courts were how local justice worked, the lord or his representative passing judgment on everything from minor disputes to serious crimes within his domain. There was no impartial justice, no concept of equality before the law. The system was explicitly designed to maintain the social order, with the lord's interests always prioritized. Wait, I should explain something here. Medieval society was based on a concept called the Great Chain of Being, a hierarchical structure where everyone had their divinely appointed place. God at the top, then angels, then kings, nobles, commoners, animals, plants. Moving out of your assigned station wasn't just socially unacceptable, it was considered an offence against the natural order, against God himself. "My lord, Lady Eleanor requests your presence at breakfast," Thomas says, after Sir William is dressed in all his finery. "She wishes to discuss Mistress Catherine's betrothal." Catherine is their eldest daughter, and at 15, well past the age when medieval nobility arranged marriages. For aristocratic families, marriages were business deals, political alliances, and property transfers all rolled into one. Love? A happy coincidence if it happened, but hardly the point. As Sir William makes his way through the manor house, the contrast with your cottage becomes even more stark. The floors here are wooden, covered in fresh rushes mixed with herbs to mask odours. Tapestries hang on walls to cut draughts and display wealth. Actual furniture, tables, chairs, chests, benches fill the rooms when most peasant homes might have only a stool or two. Yet despite these luxuries, the manor is still recognisably medieval. Smoke from open hearths blackens the ceilings. The hallways are dark, even during daytime, lit by expensive beeswax candles rather than the smelly tallow ones peasants might use on special occasions. Even with glass windows, the interior remains gloomy and draughty. Sir William enters the hall where breakfast is served. This isn't the great hall where formal feasts occur, but a smaller family dining area, still larger than your entire cottage. Lady Eleanor sits at the table with their youngest son and daughter, while servants hover nearby. "William, finally," Lady Eleanor says. She's 42, which for a noblewoman who's survived multiple childbirths is quite remarkable. Unlike peasant women, she hasn't been broken by field labour, though childbearing has taken its toll. Her clothing is even more elaborate than her husband's, a sign of the family's wealth and status. The bishop's messenger arrived, Sir William explains, taking his seat at the head of the table. "What does he want this time? More donations for the cathedral?" Lady Eleanor asks, her tone suggesting this is a frequent request. "I haven't met with him yet. I wanted breakfast first." The meal before them would seem like an impossible feast to your peasant family. Fresh bread made from refined white flour, not the coarse dark bread peasants eat. Cheese, eggs, cold meats from last night's dinner, fresh fruit preserves sweetened with honey, and wine, yes, wine with breakfast. because water isn't trusted, even by nobility. Catherine's betrothal cannot wait much longer, Lady Eleanor says, cutting directly to her concern. Lord Blackwood's son will not remain available forever. The dowry they're asking is reasonable. 20 silver marks is hardly reasonable, Sir William counters, tearing a chunk of bread. And I've heard rumours about the boy's character. All young men have character, Lady Eleanor dismisses with a wave of her hand. You certainly did. Besides, his father holds the king's favour. The connection would be valuable. This is how medieval noble marriages worked, calculating advantages, weighing costs and benefits, forming alliances. Catherine herself, though educated by medieval standards, she can probably read a bit, do basic household accounts and manage servants, has minimal say in who will become her husband. Is Catherine to marry? Asks little Margaret, their 8-year-old daughter, looking up from her bread and honey. Yes, sweet, Lady Eleanor says, and someday you will too, to a fine lord with a grand estate. Margaret wrinkles her nose. Will I have to leave Thornfield? Of course, her mother replies matter-of-factly. You'll go to your husband's home and run his household, just as I came here to run your father's. For noble daughters, this was the expected path, leaving home young to marry men often much older, moving to unfamiliar places, bearing children as soon as physically possible. Their value lay primarily in their family connections, fertility, and the lands or wealth they brought through dowries. Father Ambrose, my lord, a servant announces, and the household priest enters the hall. Unlike the village priest who serves your community, Father Ambrose is well-fed, educated, and primarily serves the noble family rather than peasant parishioners. Many wealthy households maintained their own chaplains, adding to their status and ensuring convenient religious services. The bishop's messenger brings concerning news, Father Ambrose says, declining food with a gesture. There are rumours of heresy in Thornfield village. Sir William's expression darkens. Heresy, religious dissent, was taken extremely seriously in medieval England. It threatened not just religious orthodoxy, but the entire social order. Whose house? He demands. The widow Cooper is said to be practising pagan rituals, the priest says quietly. Healing with herbs and speaking old incantations. That old woman, Lady Eleanor interjects. She delivered half the village's children. Her remedies cured Margaret's fever last winter when your prayers failed. Father Ambrose stiffens. My lady, such talk borders on dangerous ground. The bishop is sending an investigator. This exchange reveals a fascinating aspect of medieval life, the uneasy coexistence of official Christianity with folk practices that stretched back to pre-Christian times. Healers like Widow Cooper existed in nearly every village, using herbal knowledge passed down through generations. Sometimes tolerated, sometimes persecuted, they walked a dangerous line. I'll speak with the village reeve, Sir William decides. Have the woman warned, she can take her remedies to the next county before the investigator arrives. This surprisingly merciful decision isn't purely compassionate. A heresy investigation would bring unwelcome attention to Thornfield, disrupt the village workforce, and potentially reflect poorly on Sir William's management of his estate. Medieval nobility often made practical compromises between official church positions and local realities. The bishop will expect hospitality, Father Ambrose reminds him, and generous contributions to the cathedral fund. Sir William sighs. Of course he will. Very well. After breakfast, Sir William makes his way to the manor's great hall where the day's business awaits. Medieval noble life wasn't all feasting and hunting. They were essentially administrators of their estates, responsible for justice, security, and ensuring productivity from their lands. The steward, effectively the manor's chief operating officer, waits with account rolls, long parchment scrolls recording rents, harvests, expenses, and obligations. Unlike most peasants, these administrative staff are literate, handling the increasingly complex record-keeping that medieval governance required. The mill needs significant repairs before winter, my lord, the steward reports, and the bridge on the East Road collapsed during last month's rains. Costs? Sir William asks, examining the neat columns of figures. £8 for the mill, 3 for the bridge, plus labour services from the villages. These are enormous sums in medieval currency. For context, a skilled craftsman might earn £2 in an entire year. This casual discussion of spending £11 on repairs represents wealth that most people can scarcely imagine. Approve both, Sir William decides. Draft the labour requirements from the south village. The north needs to focus on bringing in the harvest. This is feudalism in action, the lord maintaining infrastructure that benefits everyone, but using his authority to command unpaid labour from his peasants to accomplish it. They'll be required to work on the bridge and mill alongside their regular farm duties, stretching their already limited time and energy. As the morning progresses, more petitioners arrive seeking Sir William's attention, a merchant requesting permission to sell goods at the village market, a neighbouring knight's representative discussing boundary disputes, a craftsman offering expensive silverwork that Lady Eleanor might desire. "My lord," Thomas interrupts quietly, "the bishop's messenger awaits." Sir William sighs and sets aside the estate accounts. "Send him in." The messenger enters, a thin, austere man in clerical robes who bows precisely the minimum amount required by courtesy. "Sir William," he begins formally, "Bishop Clarence sends his greetings and prayers for your household's continued health and prosperity." "And I return the good bishop's greetings," Sir William responds with equally formulaic courtesy. "How may Thornfield serve the church?" The messenger gets to the point. The bishop embarks on a visitation circuit next month and requests 3 nights' hospitality for himself and his retinue of 15. Sir William carefully maintains his expression, though this request represents a significant expense. Hosting a bishop and his entourage means preparing the finest foods, providing the best accommodations, offering suitable entertainment, and presenting expensive gifts. It could easily cost several pounds, but refusing is not an option. "Thornfield is honoured," he replies smoothly. "We shall prepare accordingly." The bishop also wishes to discuss your contribution to the cathedral's new south transept. He recalls your generous pledge of £20. £20, an astronomical sum that Sir William definitely did not pledge, but accusations of lying would be both useless and dangerous when dealing with church authorities. "I shall review my obligations with the steward," he says diplomatically. After the messenger departs, Sir William summons his steward and chamberlain for an emergency conference. "We need £20 for the bishop. Where can we find it?" The chamberlain looks pained. "The taxes from the North Village are already allocated for winter stores, my lord." And "we can't divert from the bridge and mill repairs," the steward adds, "not without risking greater costs come spring." Sir William paces the hall, thinking. Increase the mill fees. Every villager pays an extra penny to grind their grain. The steward hesitates. "My lord, after last year's poor harvest, the villagers are already struggling with existing fees." "Then what do you suggest?" Sir William snaps. "Should I refuse the bishop? Perhaps explain that my peasants' comfort comes before the church's needs?" This tense exchange illuminates the complex pressures faced by medieval nobility. While their lives seem luxurious compared to peasants, they're caught in their own web of obligations, expectations, and financial demands. The entire system functions on extraction, taking surplus from those below to satisfy demands from those above. Perhaps Lady Eleanor's dowry lands in Westshire, the Chamberlain suggests carefully. They could be pledged against a loan from the Jewish moneylenders in York. Sir William considers this. Catherine's dowry would suffer. Better a smaller dowry than the bishop